Welcome to the Mid-Atlantic Championship Podcast, the podcast that travels back into time to review classic episodes of Jim Crockett Promotions' Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling as it appears on the NBC Universal streaming service Peacock, as well as internationally on the WWE Network. Before we begin today's voyage, I'd just like to note we have social media on several platforms. Our Twitter is the most active, but we have a Facebook page and more. Just search at Mid-Atlantic Pod and look for the logo. And if you want to follow along with us but don't have access to Peacock or the network, you can still do so by heading over to the mighty MidAtlanticGateway.com and checking out David Taub's reviews of these classic shows. We'd also appreciate you heading over to YouTube.com/MidAtlanticPod, where you can find full podcasts, truncated versions of classic episodes, plus special audio and video clips exclusive to our page, and often with the great assistance of the mighty Mid-Atlantic Gateway website. Go to youtube.com/MidAtlanticPod and please subscribe, watch, and like the videos. It would be doing us a great service. Now, with all that out of the way, today, in episode number 42, we take a look at the television that was taped on Wednesday, November 10th, 1982, at the WPCQ Studios, Channel 36, in Charlotte, North Carolina, and began airing in local markets beginning the weekend of Saturday, November 13th. And as you may recognize, there was no WWE Network show for Saturday, November 6th, so we had to skip over that. Now, we had the results of that show, which featured the debuts of Joe Lauren, who would go on to become Road Warrior Animal, Masa Fuji, the All Japan star, as well as Ravishing Rick Rude, still in the Rick R-O-O-D form of his name, as well as Sweet Brown Sugar making his debut from Florida. So this was a very busy week of TV, which unfortunately we were not able to see. But before I bring in my co-host Roman Gomez, let me run down a couple of notable results that took place last week or during that week in which we don't have TV, because we have big news out of Norfolk on November 4th as Greg the Hammer Valentine has defeated Wahoo McDaniel to win the United States Heavyweight Championship. So that's the biggest news that we missed not having a show last week. Ric Flair, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, is also in the area. He has been facing off against Wahoo McDaniel. We had Flair defeat McDaniel in Richmond, Virginia, and we also had Ric Flair defeat Dusty Rhodes on November 6th in Greensboro, North Carolina. He did that by disqualification. Flair would also face off against Jack Briscoe, defeating him on the 7th in Roanoke. So as all of that was going on, we also had Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood defeat Sgt Slaughter and Private Kernodle, which also took place in Richmond on the 5th. And that show also featured Dusty Rhodes facing off against Leroy Brown. So you heard Sir Oliver Humperdink and Leroy Brown mention Dusty Rhodes. He is in the area as well, too, for a tour. And we're also going to get a big surprise on this show, Roman. And we don't have to wait too long to get it, as Roddy Piper starts off this episode of the show already in the ring, facing off against Frank Monty. Our referee for the day is Stu Schwartz. And joined in progress right after the credits, Piper ducks a punch from Monty, picks him up, delivers a back suplex, and that's it in 35 seconds. And then we get a very interesting interview, Roman. But let me bring you on here. And man, we've missed a week of shows. You heard everything that was taking place, and now that leads us into this deal here. Tommy Peterson, the last time we talked to people, had his sign torn up. We got all of this stuff going on, Roman. Welcome back to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling.
As always, it's a pleasure to talk with you about Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Mike. And I'm disappointed we don't have footage from last week. You know, a lot was going on, and especially the follow-up with the Tommy Peterson and Slaughter and Steamboat. That would have been fun to see how that played out on TV, you know, what the follow-up, the promos would have been. But, you know, this week they are moving things along a little bit more, so I'm looking forward to talking about this week.
Absolutely, and if you heard the last episode, episode number 41 of the show, I mentioned that if we found any clips online of that episode, either of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling that somebody had recorded way back in the day, or maybe that week's Worldwide Wrestling, that we would play it for you. I was kind of hoping that we would, because I remember, I thought at least I remembered Steamboat and Youngblood, me seeing them face off against Ricky Harris, who would become Black Bart, and Masafuchi, but I guess I was conflating that with something else because I wasn't able to find it anywhere, so very disappointing there. But as always, if anybody's got any tape or hidden shows or things that aren't on the network that they like to let us know about, we would love to bring you on and play some of the audio and bring you on to talk about it. That is for sure. But here we are opening up this show with, as I mentioned, Roddy Piper defeating Frank Monty very quickly, and after the match is over, the World Tag Team Champions Sgt Slaughter and Don Kernodle then came out to join Bob Caudle. And in the midst of their bragging, Slaughter called Piper, who was departing the ring, over to the desk to hear what he had to say. It sounded great at first for Slaughter and Kernodle, and then Piper turned the tables.
Team champions, fans. You're going to see them a little later.
What good news for you, Bob Caudle. A couple of guys, a couple of turkeys, decided they had enough guts to wrestle us on television. So today you're going to see us on television for the first time in about 5 or 6 weeks since we gained the World Tag Team title. You know, we've been looking for opponents. We can't find opponents anywhere. In fact, now why don't you come over here, Roddy Piper? I remember last week when it was 3 against 1, you guys were pretty tough. Now I got my partner here. You don't look so tough. Why don't you go get yourself a partner and wrestle the World Tag Team Champions?
I got myself a partner.
You got yourself a partner.
Let me, in case your hearing isn't too good, I said I got myself a partner.
All right, I understand. Well, being that you're Roddy Piper and you wear a skirt and play bagpipes, I guess your partner might be somebody like the Fabulous Moolah or Tommy Rich or somebody like that. Or who is your partner, Roddy Piper?
It's Abdullah the Butcher.
Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah the Butcher.
455.
No. Not Ab.
No.
Abdullah the Butcher.
Abdullah the Butcher, he said. That's right.
No, what?
All right. You fellas look stunned about that, Sergeant Slaughter.
Abdullah the Butcher.
Abdullah the Butcher, fans.
There you hear from Roddy Piper, basically saying checkmate to Sgt Slaughter and Don Kernodle, who mocked him over at ringside. And obviously we don't have the footage from last week, but we do have matches from both Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, as well as Jack and Jerry Briscoe, so I'm not sure exactly who was tying it up with Sgt Slaughter, the 3 men he's talking about, and the 2 men he's talking about that joined up with Roddy Piper last week, Roman, but we do know coming up here very shortly, Abdullah the Butcher will be at the side of Roddy Piper once again.
Yeah, that intrigued me to hear Slaughter talk about the 3-on-1 attack, and something just hearing it, you wouldn't think of it, but it's ironic that Piper and Abdullah, Piper being billed from Glasgow, Scotland, and Abdullah from Sudan, but they're both Canadian. I don't know. That just kind of stuck with me. Abdullah, real name Larry Shreves, is from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and Piper is from Canadian, and I just thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, anytime you bring Abdullah into the area, there's going to be some excitement.
And one of the amazing tricks that happened, and if in quotes here, it helped that he was stabbed in the chest. Again, obviously, I don't mean this from a wrestling point of view here, but look, Roddy Piper, nobody would have ever thought a year before now we would be cheering Roddy Piper in the way that we are, and no one would ever believe that after he did to Wahoo McDaniel at the behest of Roddy Piper, that anybody was going to be cheering Abdullah the Butcher, but here we are. That's how hated Sgt Slaughter was, and that's how hated Don Kernodle was getting, and obviously the flip side of that, that's how popular Roddy Piper was. And when we got back from break, Piper was still out there, and he was joined by Wahoo McDaniel at the podium with Bob Caudle, and we'll see tape from October 17th in Charlotte, where Wahoo helped save Piper from a 2-on-1 attack by Ric Flair and Greg Valentine. And then we hear Piper go on a semi-coherent ramble before we then go to Wahoo McDaniel, who has lost the United States title to Greg Valentine in Norfolk, and we see a clip of that.
Fans at ringside, here's Wahoo McDaniel, Roddy Piper. Roddy, you just stunned the world champions, I think, and everybody else. And a fellow that I think you'd like to really sting is one Ric Flair. What about him?
Yeah, you know, all kinds of things can be said, but instead of saying them, let's just watch a film. They got a film here for these people here, and got a film for all kinds of people. So let's just watch it and let it do the talking, man. Turn that around so these people can see something, man. Turn that around. All right, now take a look at that. Also, you see what we got here. If it wasn't for Wahoo McDaniels coming in here while Valentine and Flair were trying to rescue Flair's belt here, the blonde bombshell. They're just kind of beating up on the Chief right now because there's two of them. But all of a sudden, real brave suckers, man. Yeah, all of a sudden, when there's two of us in there, you see, they kind of take a turn for the worse. That hurt there. Yeah. That one hurt. There. Yeah, it did. Yeah, it took a turn for the worse. And Flair's going around and talking about him being a 60-minute man and all the women call him 60-minute man. And yeah, well, 60 minutes. Yeah. Is that all there is, man? Yeah, 60 minutes, that ain't a long time. If you're going to wrestle me, mister, let's just make it unlimited time limit. If Ric Flair's one, you see, now all of a sudden, talk about like little dogs running away, man. Yeah. If it wasn't for Wahoo McDaniels doing all that, see, maybe I might not be here today. So, like, what I'm trying to tell you is the good man Wahoo McDaniels himself has been cheated, and it's right on the film here. You're going to watch, putting my hands in the air, you geek. Yeah, I didn't do nothing, man. I didn't do nothing but give me half a chance. Yeah, Flair, Valentine, yeah, that's all you need. Yeah, all you need, you see, all I need is people like Wahoo McDaniels on my side. Never had that before, huh? We've done a lot of fighting, Wahoo. never seen you. Yeah, that's why I switched. I don't want to fight him no more. Yeah, as tough as you are. Yeah, that's not true either. Yeah, that's not true either. But what I'm telling you here, it's a good thing that Wahoo was here. That's simply is what I'm saying. And the good chief himself there, Four Feathers. This is just little Scout here talking to you, man. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. Yeah, that's the truth.
Wahoo. Roddy talking about, but I imagine you feel a little bad out here right now without that belt, Wahoo.
Well, I don't feel bad. If you're going to be a champion, you're going to win and lose. And over the years I've won and lost, and our one record is probably 990%. So the people can scream, well, he took the belt away from me. Sure. Well, just watch how he does it.
And we're talking about Greg Valentine.
That's right.
The new U.S. champion.
That's right.
We got a film of this, I think.
That's right. As you can see right here, we're battling, and as you can see, let's turn around where they can see you.
All right. Wahoo.
See right here. This is on the road right here. Greg's got on top of me. We've been fighting here for about 30, 40 minutes. And you see right there, he kneed me in the chest. And as you can see, stomped me in the face.
That's right.
Right there. You see right there, he has advantage. I mean, I'm not going to say that's because he's a good athlete. He's tough. He was a U.S. heavyweight champion at one time. He's part of the world champion at one time.
Wahoo, he hurt you real bad one time, too. Is that in your mind during this match?
He broke my leg, yeah. I broke a bone in my ankle, and I could stand around and cry over spilled milk, but I didn't. I took my blow in the chin and came back.
Well, you guys are really slugging it out right against the ropes here, Wahoo.
Yeah, this is a real slugfest, and as you can see, it's a real tough battle. It's a hard-fought battle, and anytime you're in a championship match, Piper's going to tell you they're going to fight hard as they can.
Yeah, he went right down from that chop, that tomahawk chop.
That's right, brother. I gave him one right across the bridge of the nose, and he didn't like it too well.
Well, right here looks like you've got the upper hand. That the belt is safe and secure around your waist.
Well, I don't think any time in a match you say safe and secure when you're wrestling a guy as good as you are, And we fought. We fought all over that place. And
now you're out of the ring fighting.
Yep. I just gave him a dose of his own medicine. I ran him in the post. He'd run me in the post earlier in the match. And he didn't like it too well when he gets a dose of his own medicine. And he's screaming. And he doesn't like it when he had the shoes on the other foot no more than I do. And I don't like to be hurt. Piper doesn't like to be hurt. Nobody wants to be hurt. I'm out here to wrestle and to win. And as you can see right there, I've got to put.
Well, you got him swinging. He's swinging with those wild lefts and rights. He's evidently really stunned at this point. He's missing those blows of his, Wahoo.
As you see right there, I almost tore his head off, and he managed to get to the rope.
That might have been it right there.
He got to the rope, and as you see Humperdink there, and as you see, he crawls out of the ring. And as he comes around there, I think
that's an important thing to remember. Valentine out of the house of Humperdink
right.
too, Wahoo.
As you see right there, he handed him something. I didn't know this. I didn't see it. I came around and I hit him, and the light's bad, you can't see, but the man definitely has something in his hand here. I came around him and I suplexed him right here.
Boy, that's another wild right.
Right here, I suplexed him. Look there. See there?
Ooh.
Something on his hand, and you know, the man definitely had something on his hand. You can see it. The man knocked me out. He's got the belt. I could have probably protested. Took 2 or 3 months of writing letters and everything and trying to get him fined, but I'd rather do it myself. I'm like Piper. I don't want anybody else to do my fighting. I don't need anybody else to do my fighting. I can do my own fighting. I'm going to get my eye knocked shut every once in a while. I'm going to get a fat lip. But I'll tell you one thing. I will be the U.S. champion before Thanksgiving.
All right. There it is. That's a message.
And Flair,
that's a message to both to Ric Flair and, of course, to Greg Valentine. And we're going to be watching Wahoo McDaniel in action in the ring right now as Wahoo's getting into the ring against the Japanese who, in our last week or two, we saw really looking good in that ring. Masa Fuji. Wahoo McDaniel, the chief now, against Masa Fuji. And the bell, and we're ready now with the action.
And there we hear from Roddy Piper and Wahoo McDaniel. Roman, Wahoo finally gets a reign as the United States heavyweight champion, one that is not cut short like his first two were. This third reign goes for about 74, 75 days, and then comes to an end in Norfolk, Virginia, at the hands of the Hammer, who has been aiming for Wahoo and just brings home another championship to the House of Humperdink. But any thoughts on that, as well as anything that Roddy Piper was trying to convey to us?
Piper was all over the place. He was typical Piper, you know, and it was just the way he called himself Little Scout and Four Feathers, and it almost seemed condescending kind of in a way towards Wahoo, you know, with those names. But anyway, it was good to see Valentine, you know, emerge as the United States heavyweight champion, but I really liked the finish of the foreign object. You know, that was back in the day when you can use a foreign object, get the heel over, get them a championship. Now, guys, they can't even call it a foreign object because they hit their opponents right in front of the ref with stuff, and, you know, and they don't get disqualified, you know. But back then, the sneaky way of Valentine winning the United States heavyweight title was a good thing to see. And like you said, it brought another championship into the House of Humperdink.
Yeah, a pair of brass knuckles used to do a whole lot of damage, didn't it, back in the day? Now we've got doors and tables and all sorts of such that just come into our matches on the regular, but we don't talk about that thing here. This is an environment that's closed to anything except for what happened this week in 1982. And thank God for that. But you hear Wahoo McDaniel getting in the ring there against Masa Fuji, and you heard Bob Caudle kind of put over Masa Fuji, and he would go on to fame a lot later on in All Japan, as he won the All Japan Championship 5 times between 1987 and 1996. The Junior Heavyweight Championship, that is, and he really is All Japan's most notable junior heavyweight after Atsushi Onita suffered what at the time was thought to be a career-ending injury. And because of the flash of New Japan did a much better job putting over their junior heavyweight talent, Tiger Mask, Dynamite Kid, into the era of Jushin Thunder Liger and the men that came after him. You know, Masanobu Fuji just did not get a lot of the acclaim, but many of you out there listening are probably hardcore wrestling fans or were tape traders, and he certainly appeared on many, many of those All Japan shows, and he really was a hell of a professional wrestler. And we see him at this early point in his career on excursion in America, facing off against the Chief, Wahoo McDaniel, upset he doesn't have his United States championship anymore. And no surprise, Wahoo McDaniel gets the victory. Roman, any thoughts on this match?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you said, Fucci is no slouch. He used to wrestle with Onita in Memphis. And, of course, they had the famous concession stand brawl against Morton and Gilbert. And in this match, it was 4 minutes, but it was back and forth. And, it was good enough action to keep you entertained. And in the end, Wahoo's chops were too much for Fucci.
During the match, Bob notes that next week we'll be seeing Dusty Rhodes and Dory Funk Jr. in action. Plus, Bruiser Brody, Dick Murdoch, and Harley Race all coming into the area. Again, if you're a regular listener and have been following us week after week after week, we have been hearing these names come in and be announced as coming in, and they all kind of have a Florida vibe to them. You may not have known that then, but certainly in hindsight, the Brickhouse Browns, the gentlemen like that, Bruiser Brody, the Briscoe brothers, Jerry Briscoe now coming in as Jack has been in the area. All of this Florida influence. Dusty Rhodes coming into the area. So a lot of Florida influence taking place on these shows, booked by Dory Funk Jr. We then move on to another Florida favorite, Jos LeDuc, against Rick Rude. And at this point, Jos LeDuc was not a fan favorite. In fact, he has been battling on house shows against the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, one of the prime members of the House of Humperdink, and he's facing off against a Rick Rude, who was not Rick Rude then. In fact, you know what? Earlier on, I made a mistake. He wasn't even ROOD. He was Ricky Rudd. No, not the Tide Box NASCAR driver from back in the day. No, he was Ricky Rudd, just a built guy with a tattoo on his arm who could not wrestle worth a lick. And you will hear stories of Jim Cornette talking about Dennis Condrey putting Rick Rude in a headlock, calling a spot, having Rude having no idea on what to do with it, and them walking around 2 or 3 times before Dennis finally told him to tag out. Folks, this is a long time before that. not eons before it, but long before it, if that gives you any idea what this match may look like. Jos LeDuc does a good job with a guy who is greener than a pepper tree, greener than goose shit, greener than green grass, greener than I don't know what, Roman, greener than the Green Bay, Wisconsin. I mean, the Packers. I don't even know how can you explain, in your words, what would you compare Rick Rude to as far as on the level of the green chart? Like Kermit, what would he be?
He was green, but that's what makes doing this podcast fun, is to go back and look at guys to see the origins of this. We've talked about Rotundo, how far he had come, and to see Rick Rude here as pale and, like you said, not knowing what to do, and it's just kind of fun to go back in time and see that. And you mentioned Joe Lauren, Road Warrior Animal. It was fun to see him as before he was a Road Warrior, and Rude was definitely green. There's no doubt. And anybody that saw this match or any of his early footage, you can tell he was real green.
I don't even know how it ended. I'm going to go back and double check. I think it was the backbreaker over the knee. But the only note I have here is Rudd is so early in his career that it's somewhat amusing to see, knowing where he ended up. This is an absolute mauling, and it was beyond bowling shoe ugly. And the only thing I'm going to note about this, when it comes to Rick Rude, is we are all very lucky in that his entire career and his evolution from being this green and this bad to as great as he became, almost all of it is on tape. It's one of those things we are so lucky because he starts off here. We have him in Memphis, but before that, we obviously have him in Mid-South, and then we have him in Memphis, and then we have him in Florida, and then we have him in Dallas, and then we have him in Charlotte, and then we have him in the WWF, and then later on WCW. And we're very lucky to have all of that. And, there's not many guys we have a complete run of, for the most part, but we get a great idea on the run that Rick Rude had. So just one of those things that if you wanted to ever go back and do a deep dive on somebody or ever had that time to, Rick Rude's one of those guys who's a great one to start with because so much of him is out there. But we'll get back to the show here. Greg the Hammer Valentine, your new United States Heavyweight Champion. Sir Oliver Humperdink joined Bob briefly in lieu of where the local promos would be. That is until King Parsons and Gary Black came out of the studio door and then made their way over to the ringside area. Bob summoned them over, and we got these insights about their upcoming match with the World Tag Team Champions.
We're going to be watching in action the World Tag Team Champions in just a few moments. Here is the manager, though, of the U.S. Heavyweight Champ, Sir Oliver Humperdink.
That's exactly right, and you had the pleasure of seeing the United States Heavyweight Champion just a few moments ago. But I want everybody now to know and everybody to be warned that before too very long, a gentleman is going to be coming into this area by the name of Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody, his reputation precedes himself, isn't that right?
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. We saw that man up there. I tell you, I was going to try to get a couple of fellas. We're going to watch him in action against the world champions over here. I'd like to hear about him a little later. I wanted to get King Parsons and his partner Gary Black over because I did want to ask him about the World Tag Team Champions in this match. King, you and Gary Black quickly here. What about the World Champions?
Hey, man, what can you say? They're the World Champions. They're two of the best, man. So let me put it this way. Hey, it's a pleasure, brother. I feel good to get in this ring tonight because I know one thing. I got nothing to lose, me and Black. We got everything to gain.
You got a lot to lose when you go in there against a couple like this because they can hurt you, and they may try to hurt you.
That's the name of the game, brother. The only way you're going to learn is get in there and get in there with the best. Win, lose, or draw. Anybody that steps inside that four-corner ring, they're going to have to have their head together, brother, because it's strictly business then. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I know what you mean.
So I'm ready.
All right, and Gary Black, what about
I'm
it in there
too.
with
Sgt
Slaughter and Don Kernodle?
I feel privileged to have a partner like King Parsons. Sgt Slaughter not the only one that's ever in the Marine Corps. I did 3 years, 6 months, and I just love to punch him in his big fat nose. If he gets nasty with me, I'm going to get nasty back.
All right, I tell you what, maybe you can pay the debt to all the sergeants that you had in there before. Pay it all back to this one right here, Gary.
Well, I don't hold no grudge against any of the others, but this man punched me. I'm gonna do my best to lay him out.
All right, and I tell you, King, you and your partner here, you got to be on your toes because you know these two guys, they want to really work over anybody they get in the ring.
That's right. And anytime you step in that ring, you got to be on your toes. If it's Sgt Slaughter, Kernodle, Valentine, Humperdink, the House of Humperdink, it don't matter who it is, man. When you step inside that ring, you better be on the ball.
All right, fans, and that's it right here at ringside.
There we hear from the future Iceman King Parsons, along with his partner Gary Black, who still holds the memories of being in basic training, obviously, because he remembers that he was in the Marine Corps for 3 years and 6 months, and when offered the opportunity to maybe give a little back to the drill sergeants of the past by the way of beating on Sgt Slaughter, he even hesitated to do that. So that's in lieu of where the local promos were. I just kind of wanted to play that one, Roman, because we haven't had a chance to see Parsons much or hear him much since he had teamed up with Pork Chop Cash, and they were the Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Champions earlier on in the year. But talked about Rick Rude earlier on, who was really able to come out of his shell as a big singles star in Dallas with World Class. Iceman Parsons did the same a few years sooner.
Without a doubt. And something I thought was unusual was that they make a big announcement that Brody's coming, and it seems like Cottle kind of wanted to sweep it under the rug for the moment because he really wanted to talk to Gary Black. I just thought that was a little unusual. You know, that should have been a bigger deal about Brody. They talk about him later on.
Well, there's the thing.
Cottle was...
I think there's the thing is later on because, and I wonder, was this a timing issue with those guys coming out of the back, or was it an issue where Humperdink jumped the gun on thinking that he was supposed to be out there and then had to go and, because we don't see it, and obviously the next match is Slaughter and Kernodle, so there's no reason for Hump to be out there because it's not one of his guys. So I'm wondering, it's either was he sent out incorrectly because this is where they were going to run the local spots, or exactly what happened there. Yeah, it's interesting because, as you mentioned, they bring up Brody, and then it's like, all right, we got to get out of here because here comes Parsons and Gary Black, whom, for all I know, I've got to look at last week's results. I believe this is the first time we're ever even seeing this guy.
Yeah, I thought that was unusual, and evidently he's got a bone to pick with people that did him wrong in the military. So, let's put him in the ring against Slaughter.
And that's what they do. Sgt Slaughter, Don Kernodle, the World Tag Team Champions, who have complained over and over and over and over again that they don't have any competition. Finally, somebody has stepped up. Finally, two men have stepped up. Not just one and having their partner run away from them, as Sgt Slaughter claimed a couple weeks ago when Don Kernodle had to wrestle a solo match. Nope. King Parsons and Gary Black are the men who are there to take on the challenge. This is no surprise. Slaughter and Kernodle won very, very quickly. Slaughter won, forcing Gary Black, sending him back into crazed nightmares of Full Metal Jacket in his time being yelled at during basic training. He submits to the Cobra Clutch. That is that. And then, finally, Roman, we do get Sir Oliver Humperdink and Paul Jones, Greg Valentine, Leroy Brown, Jos LeDuc, the entire House of Humperdink here. Now, this, I don't know about the version that you saw, because Roman, for those who are unaware on many of these shows, I'm watching the Peacock version of the show, and Roman is watching the old WWE Classics version of the show, which sometimes differ. Back when WWE had a monthly video on demand service and was a service that they had for certain cable companies. But bottom line is, did it seem to you that this promo was actually kind of joined in progress? Because it certainly did on my end.
Yeah, it seemed, I don't know, just the way they did the editing on some of these segments seemed very weird, you know. And yeah, maybe it was joined in progress, but one thing I did like on the clip is that they showed Brody in Japan. And to me, that just makes somebody look like a little bit bigger of a star when they can go to another country and dominate their talent as well as the talent here in the States.
Absolutely. It always worked on me then. It worked on me my entire wrestling fandom, because this is when I was becoming a wrestling fan. And to open up magazines like Inside Wrestling as the 80s went on to the back of the page, and it was the roll call of champions. And I'll always remember Dan Croffett and Doug Furness, because the All-Asia Tag Team Champions were often the first team listed, and there they were. And I would look at the PWF Tag Team Championship and see Stan Hansen and Ted DiBiase, and it's like, yeah, I didn't know they teamed together. This is awesome. So yeah, it's you know, that stuff, you know, those things meant something. You know, that type of stuff meant something. It mattered, and having that mystique mattered, whether it was true or not. It was so easy. It was much easier, at least I should say, to help trick your fan base, except for the very, very hardcore. And we'll get right to the interview here, as well as Sir Oliver Humperdink and the entire House of Humperdink, letting you know that they are champions.
Now, let me just spotlight a few of my men right here, like Paul Jones, the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion. Jack Briscoe's hot on the trail, but so far we still got the gold, right?
Let me tell you something. Everybody is after this man, Humperdink, right here. They're trying everything to corner him in a ring. But I tell you one thing, Humperdink has nothing to worry about as long as he has the House of Humperdink. And I'm talking about all these champions standing over here. You know, you can't keep a secret. I understand that there is a tournament for a belt, a TV belt. Well, let me tell you something. This Humperdink here promised me this Mid-Atlantic belt, and he came true. And I'm going to tell you something else right now. I think Humperdink can put it in finer words.
That's exactly right. But let me just talk about Greg Valentine and this very prized possession. That's the U.S. heavyweight title belt. He took it off Wahoo McDaniel. You did it all by yourself, didn't you?
You know, Wahoo McDaniel gets out here and he talks over a VTR, tells everybody that Humperdink handed me something, a pair of brass knuckles. I don't even know what a pair of brass knuckles look like. Wahoo McDaniel, what happened to you is you ran in to the hammer and it knocked your lights out. I'm going to be the United States champion for a long, long time.
Talking about champions, there's one that doesn't have a belt.
I'll tell you, I want to bring these next two gentlemen in here. Bad Leroy Brown and Jos LeDuc. Now, as you know, there's going to be a one-night tournament for that TV title that Jos LeDuc still owns, as far as I'm concerned. But what happened is Jos LeDuc assaulted, is the word, an NWA official. They stripped him of the title. They're going to have a one-night tournament, and to add insult to injury, they won't even let Jos LeDuc into the tournament. But I do have an entrance, and the entrance is right here, Bad Leroy Brown. And when that tournament comes around, brother, I'm promising you, you're going to be the TV champion.
Don't worry about it. You know, Sanders Scott thought he was real smart when he took Joe's belt. But we got news for him, baby. We're going to keep that belt right in the House of Humperdink. The day of seeing the day has come. We rule wrestling, the House of Humperdink.
And look at this stupid punk up here in the ring. Take a look at this.
Yeah.
All right, fans, and that's it. Right here ringside, the House of Humperdink. We're about ready for action in the ring, and as we promise you fans, this very special challenge match. As young Mike Rotundo again has challenged out of the house of Humperdink, Bad Leroy Brown. Let's go to the ring now, the introduction. First, here he is from Syracuse, New York, at 242 pounds, the outstanding young athlete, Mike Rotundo. And across the ring now, his opponent, out of the house of Humperdink from Chicago, at 312 pounds, Bad Leroy Brown.
There we hear from the house of Humperdink, and Leroy Brown getting into the ring to continue on his feud with Mike Rotundo, still addled with an injured neck, still wearing the neck collar. Once again, Bob Caudle, during this match, talks about Bruiser Brody coming into the area. This match with Rotundo ends in a disqualification. Once again, Leroy Brown is about to cause havoc and harm to Mike Rotundo by pile driving him before Jack Briscoe runs out and makes the save. And you did hear a little bit earlier on Sir Oliver Humperdink talk about how Leroy Brown was being inserted into the television championship tournament as his entrant, and we will probably be seeing this feud and that belt join forces very soon, but I don't want to give too much away, Roman. But once again, the Brown-Rotundo feud rolls on.
Yes, and thank goodness for Jack Briscoe to come out to the rescue, and I thought it was pretty good what happened afterwards with the interviews with Rotundo. Yeah,
and here's I'm going to play them, and I don't know by the time that everyone hears this show with post-production if you're going to hear all of it or not, but I wanted to do this just to show these in lieu of spots, these practice promos that guys were doing, like Mike Rotundo, trying to get better, and you're basically going to hear the same promo twice. And this happens a lot on the network when you have these types of promos that basically a guy is just warming up and getting something ready. You know, I know Brian Adias, I can think of a couple of times of him doing this, seeing stuff in 1984 with him, you know, basically cutting a promo and then cutting the exact same promo that we saw on the show back in the day. And this is going to be one of the greatest examples of it. It's going to show why it's good that these promos happen. And it's going to show both the pros and cons of Mike Rotundo and trying to learn who he is and how to get fired up and where to put inflection and these things and how to, and some negatives on, like, don't cut the same promo twice. Figure out what worked the first time before you make it TV ready. And, oh, well, I'm doing a promo right here, cutting on these promos, and I'll just get to them. Mike Rotundo upset with Leroy Brown, and he's got another challenge coming up for next week.
Right there, Mikey almost had you again in that pile driver.
I'm sick and tired of it. I really thank Jack Briscoe for helping me out. But myself, I'm not going to accept it. I can't accept it myself. If I'm going to stay in professional wrestling, I got to learn to beat guys like Leroy Brown and just slam me on this floor. And I'm not going to take it, Leroy. I'm telling you, I'm sick and tired of taking it. And I'm not going to take it.
Yes, sir. Rotundo.
If it's the last breath I got, I'll beat that man in that ring. And if Humperdink sticks his nose in there too, I'm going to smack him because I'm sick of it. I got to learn sooner or later. And brother, I learned tonight one thing, that I'm going to take care of myself.
Okay, Mike Rotundo. And Mike, I know you're really upset about that, and who can blame you after that match there with those two guys. And Humperdink always outside of the ring, and he's going to add to it.
You can't have a match. I signed for a match. I'm going to have Leroy. I want to be publicly known that I'm going to have Leroy on TV here next week. And I'll be darned if I don't beat him right in that ring.
Mike, I got to tell you one thing. You just refuse to give up. I mean, you go back for more and more with the guy.
I've been in sports all my life, and I got to learn how to take care of myself. I learned when I started amateur wrestling, amateur football. I've never quit on anything. And I've become champion as an amateur, and I'm going to become champion in professional wrestling. If it takes every bit of strength and energy I got, and I'm going to start right here with Leroy Brown because I'm not going down, I'm going up.
All right, Mike, I tell you, you can see that Brown, it looks to me like he tries to hurt you each time in every match. That
Jack just saved me here.
He's going to put the pile driver on you, hurt you, do anything he can.
He saved me here. Jack saved me here.
but I just can't accept that. I have to take it upon myself, like I said before, because if I'm going to stay in this sport, I'm going to have to learn how to take care of myself, and I just have to. That's the only thing I can do. That's all that's left.
All right, the House of Humperdink, it just continues to grow. He's telling us now that Bruiser Brody is going to be a part of the House of Humperdink. You add that to Leroy Brown, to Greg Valentine, to Paul Jones, to Jos LeDuc, and he has really built a stable for himself.
The list goes on, but what are you going to do? You got either fight or run. And I know guys like Jack, Jerry Briscoe, Wahoo McDaniels, everybody on there, Ricky Steamboat, Jay Youngblood, we're going to fight because there's a matter of pride in this, and we're going to fight for it.
All right, fans, and that's it right here ringside. Mike, I tell you, it was a tough one in there, and the guy tried to hurt you again.
That's right. I thank Jack Briscoe. Jack Briscoe came down here and helped me. He saved me, but I can't accept that. I can't accept it to myself. I got to come out here, and I got to beat that man. And if it takes every last bit of air in my system, I got to beat him. Leroy Brown, I'm challenging you to a TV match here next week. And I'll be darned if I don't come out of that ring a winner, because I have to learn myself. If I'm going to stay in professional wrestling, I'm going to have to learn for myself to take care of myself.
Well, Roman, there we hear from Mike Rotundo, both what only the studio audience and Bob Caudle heard initially, and then what everybody in the Mid-Atlantic viewing area heard. His challenge to Leroy Brown coming out of break there, and essentially cut the exact same promo. Obviously, he didn't cut it down a little bit there, but what'd you think about Rotundo?
It was definitely the pros and cons, like you said. You know, I had flashbacks to when Rotundo first came in the area, and he called it the Mid-Atlantic Conference, you know, and he was real bland. But in this, there was actually a little bit of fire. He was pissed off. He wanted Leroy Brown. He's a champion, and he's challenging the challenger. You know, you can actually see a little passion in Rotundo, but it went too long. It was just very bizarre editing on this whole episode.
And, you know, it's some bizarre editing that I have done with this show, too, because let's rewind back two matches before Slaughter and Kernodle faced off against Parsons and Black. I don't believe that I mentioned that the brand new United States heavyweight champion, Greg the Hammer Valentine, got into a little bit of a battle against Ron Ritchie, and as I've talked about with both of these two, every time they face each other, it's good stuff because they can just beat the heck out of each other. They're so used to doing it. They're perfectly matched up. And this one went a little shorter than we usually we've gotten out of these two. But Valentine gets the victory, back suplex, elbow drop. The Hammer drops for the victory and chalk one up for the new U.S. champ.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add, I'm glad you mentioned that about Valentine. He hit a real nice-looking pile driver, and that's not something you associate Valentine with as a pile driver. And the one he executed in that match came off real nice.
It is. It's actually really sweet. That's something I should actually do in GIF form, put it up on the Twitter and the Facebook and everything, because it's like Kernodle's dropkick. It's just something you didn't necessarily put with that person, but you see him doing it. It's like, damn, that was really, really good. And you heard Jimmy Valiant's overdub maybe possibly have played there. That is because at the end of Mike Rotundo's interview, we got the Boogie Woogie Man and the Briscoe brothers into the ring to face off against Ken Timms, Private Nelson, and Gene Anderson, a motley trio if I ever did see them. Private Nelson, once again, being demoted in class here on these cards, spaced away from Slaughter and Kernodle. Gene Anderson, who has been in obvious rough form ever since his stroke and has not been overly active on television in there, alongside Ken Timms, who would go on for a very long and illustrious career on the southern scene mostly, but this thing only lasts 20, 30 seconds or whatever. I mean, we bookended essentially with 30-second matches on TV. Very quickly, Jerry has Timms tapping out to the figure four as a bunch of Valiant chaos kind of goes on there, and that was that, which led out to the interviews with the Briscoes at the end of the show, Roman. But any thoughts on that half-a-minute match?
Well, you knew, considering the placement of this match, you knew it was going to be short. I had it around the 45-minute mark on my copy is when this match took place. So you knew it was going to be a short match, and then you knew when you saw who was wrestling, you're like, I'm guessing Tim's is going to take the fall. And he did. And I thought it was kind of funny how Gene Anderson took a punch and then ran 15 feet across the ring to tag in so Tim's could take the pinfall.
You know, a lot of my memories of Jerry Briscoe would start in 1984 in the work that in 83 with the stuff with Steamboat and Youngblood and in their time in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and in the off chances that I would see them in Georgia before they went on to the WWF, where it was a little bit easier for me to see them where I was in Washington, D.C. And at that time, I'd always just associated him as a tag team wrestler. I'd look back in the magazines and I would see his name listed, Southern Junior Champion or Florida Champion or something like that, but it still never really sunk in as much as it did with Jack because he was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and I always put Jerry, as Jack's brother, growing up as a wrestling fan, because that's what I knew of him. But going back to watch this, to be able to have the interview at the end with both Briscoe brothers where just by them standing there, and they kind of hint at this when they're talking, Roman, they are a threat to every single title in the area. Jack's had the Mid-Atlantic title. Jack's had the NWA World Heavyweight title, and Ric Flair has been back into the area. Jack, if I'm not mistaken, was a U.S. champion. Jerry Briscoe was an Eastern States champion. They both were, as well as being a Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight champion. TV championships, the tag team championship, no matter what it is, those guys were a threat just standing there, and it's just kind of in hindsight going back and putting myself in 1982, how big of a deal it was. Forget about Jack, but that Jerry was back in this area where he has been a star at this point. God, going back to what, 72, 73? It's been a decade now that Jerry Briscoe's been a star in the Mid-Atlantic area.
Yeah, Jerry often gets lost in the shuffle, and you can see why people would do that, when your brother is a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion. But, Jerry Briscoe was a junior heavyweight champion back when that title actually meant a little something. But talk about the difference in the episodes, Mike. I didn't get the Briscoes interview on my version. So you got something I didn't get to see.
I wonder why that is. It may have been because of the I don't know, maybe it's because of Valiant. Maybe I have no idea why they would have actually done that then. Maybe they sacrificed the Brody video from Japan, leaving that in there. You know what I mean? Maybe that was the sacrifice, was you got that, but you didn't get the Briscoes at the end bragging about what they're going to do. But you know what? Lucky for you and lucky for everybody else out there who does not have the ability to check these shows out. That's what we are here for, to educate, to inform, and to entertain, and to give you the wrestling history that you need, like the Briscoe brothers, letting you know that they are threats to everything in the Mid-Atlantic area.
Seeing my brother here, there's always action. My brother in here, we've got several things to look forward to. The TV title belt has been vacated. We're certainly looking forward to getting into that tournament for that TV belt, and I know the boogeyman is too.
Bob, there's all kinds of great opportunities right here. TV championship up for grabs and a tremendous tournament coming up. Also, Sgt Slaughter Don Kernodle, World Tag Team Champions. There's somebody waiting for you around the corner, brother.
Also, Mr. Paul Jones, number one, the Mid-Atlantic champion. You be watching over your shoulder.
And that is that to end the show. Jerry Briscoe and Jack Briscoe. Jerry Briscoe, 4 Mid-Atlantic/Eastern States Heavyweight Championship victories, defeated Rip Hawk 3 times between 1972 and 1973. Also knocked off Ole Anderson as well in 1973. 3 of those 4 title changes taking place in the state of South Carolina. So Jerry Briscoe, again, we don't mention him maybe as much as we should when we talk about the Rushmores of the early history, the early 70s portion. A lot of time always talking about Johnny Valentine, Wahoo, Ric Flair coming into the area. Of course, the Anderson brothers. So many greats that maybe sometimes we forget about Jerry Briscoe, and we shouldn't do that. And maybe I'm just yelling at myself here for that, Roman. But you heard the outro there of the music going off the air. Briscoe's closing the show, and we've come to the end of another Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling episode.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to furthering the story with Slaughter, Steamboat, the Tommy Peterson stuff, Piper bringing Abdullah in, Brody you know, we've talked at length that the tremendous amount of talent that the Mid-Atlantic area had, and they didn't rest on their laurels. They kept bringing people in. So this is a great time to be a fan of the Mid-Atlantic, and I can't wait to talk about what's coming up.
Oh, yeah, there is crazy good stuff, and I'll let everyone know on Worldwide Wrestling, we have the results of the sister show, which was taped immediately after Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and Greg Valentine defeated Keith Larson. Paul Jones, it was his turn to help educate Rick Rude, defeated him. The Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, defeated Ricky Harris, the future Black Bart. The Briscoe brothers defeated Bill White and Ken Timms, our favorite Bill White. Sgt Slaughter and Private Kernodle defeated Ron Ritchie and Mike Davis, which, if given any time at all, which it probably was not, was probably really good. Same goes for Roddy Piper and Masafuchi, which I'm sure didn't go a whole lot of time, but I bet you Fucci got a little bit of offense in, as well as Wahoo McDaniel knocking off Frank Monty.
Let's take time for this commercial message about the Mid-Atlantic wrestling events coming up in your area.
On Thursday, November 11th in Winston-Salem, North Carolina at Memorial Coliseum, Roddy Piper, Jay Youngblood, and Jack Briscoe defeated Sgt Slaughter, Leroy Brown, and Paul Jones. Ricky Steamboat defeated Greg Valentine, and Private Kernodle defeated Sweet Brown Sugar. On Friday, November 12th in Charlotte at the Coliseum, Paul Jones defeated Jack Briscoe by DQ. Dusty Rhodes defeated Leroy Brown. Sgt Slaughter and Private Kernodle battled Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood to a no contest, and Roddy Piper and Wahoo McDaniel defeated Ric Flair and Greg Valentine in a steel cage match. The next night, on Saturday, November 13th in Spartanburg, Paul Jones defeated Jack Briscoe, Ricky Steamboat subbing for Jay Youngblood defeated Greg Valentine, and Sweet Brown Sugar defeated Leroy Brown. Also on Saturday in Lumberton at the Recreation Center, Wahoo McDaniel and Roddy Piper defeated Sgt Slaughter and Private Kernodle by DQ, and Ron Ritchie defeated Private Nelson. Also on Saturday in Fredericksburg at the Stafford High School, Joe LeDuc and Oliver Humperdink defeated Jimmy Valiant and Mike Rotundo. The Fabulous Moolah defeated Sabrina, and King Parsons defeated Ken Timms. On Sunday, November 14th, a special Sunday afternoon show in Columbia, South Carolina at Township Auditorium. We don't have the results, but the lineup looked like this. Roddy Piper faced off against Greg Valentine. Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood against Sgt Slaughter and Private Kernodle in a boot camp match. Jimmy Valiant, Jerry Briscoe, and Sweet Brown Sugar against Leroy Brown, Joe LeDuc, and Oliver Humperdink. Private Nelson against Gary Black. Gene Anderson against Ron Ritchie, and Masafuchi against King Parsons. Also on Sunday in Asheville at the Civic Center, Roddy Piper defeated Greg Valentine. Sgt Slaughter and Private Kernodle defeated Ricky Steamboat and Johnny Weaver, and Jack Briscoe defeated Paul Jones. On Monday, November 15th in Greenville, South Carolina, Jimmy Valiant defeated Greg Valentine by DQ, Sweet Brown Sugar defeated Leroy Brown, and Jack Briscoe defeated Dory Funk Jr. There was no wrestling held in Raleigh on Tuesday, November 16th, but there was wrestling held in Abbeville, South Carolina at the Civic Center, and Sgt Slaughter and Private Kernodle faced off against Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood there. No results. And that takes us back around to Wednesday, November 17th, Charlotte, North Carolina, WPCQ Studios. And here is the WWE Network preview for next week's show. Mike Rotundo continues to chase victory by challenging Bad Leroy Brown in the main event. They're kind of bearing the lead on a pretty good match, but we'll have to leave you in suspense until next week. If you like this show and would like to connect with it more, I invite you to follow us across our many forms of social media, especially on Twitter. Just search @MidAtlanticPod. We would also really appreciate you following us on YouTube, youtube.com/MidAtlanticPod. Full and truncated podcasts, plus great audio and video clips from the rich history of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett Promotions. That's youtube.com/MidAtlanticPod. I also invite you to support all of the programs and content here on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. We don't condescend, and we are dedicated to preserving and accurately archiving the history of professional wrestling. And I'm proud that this show, produced by me, can be a part of that. For Roman Gomez, I'm Mike Sempervive. Take us home, Bob DeBartoleben and Uncle Bob Cottle.
Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling has been furnished to this station for broadcast at this time by Jim Crockett Promotions in exchange for commercial consideration.
Fans, next week on Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Bobo Brazil and the Mighty Igor against Charlie Fulton and Tony Russo. Mr. Wrestling will take on Larry Sharp. Paul Jones and Wahoo McDaniel against Kim Duck and Ricky Ferrara. Superstar and the Russian Stauber against Francisco Flores and Steve Kovacs. And Blackjack Mulligan will take on Phil Mercado all next week.